Paula, one thing I would say in regard to Deputy Tobin there, I don't think anybody should talk about reconfiguring the structures of Stormont until the Executive and Assembly are restored, because I think if you went down the route of trying to bring changes about now, you'd be into even more deep difficulty. And all of us in this House want to see the institutions back up and fully functioning and representing the people that the Assembly a year ago were decided in an election. Taoiseach, I'm very glad that recently there was a meeting of the British Irish Council. There was also yesterday a meeting of the British Irish Intergovernmental Conference. I watched BBC and UTV last night, and it was clear from the remarks of Taoiseach Micheál Martin that the government was not in any way weakening its response to the desperate legislative measures that the British government are trying to put through their House of Lords at the present time. Under no circumstances can we accept that bill in any shape or form. It cannot be amended to be a good piece of legislation. It needs to be scrapped, and we need to go back to the drawing board, at least to the Stormont House Agreement, to deal with legacy issues. Taoiseach, I was very glad yesterday that BBC also reported that the British government's lack of response to this Parliament in regard to the Dublin and Monaghan bombings of 17th of May 1974, and also requests made by yourself and by Taoiseach as well, following repeated representations by myself in regard to the Belturbet bombing of 1972, that those issues were raised again yesterday. Under no circumstances could the government countenance in any way any acceptance in any shape or form of the legacy bill. It's reprehensible. Again, as Deputy Tobin said, it's providing an amnesty for murderers that belong to paramilitary organisations and murderers from British state forces as well. People, regardless of their background, if they caused murder or caused harm and carried out criminal acts, they should not get an amnesty under any shape or form. Thank you, Alaskan Court.
Just to record the fact that the BWIGC and the British Irish Council, two institutions of the Good Friday Agreement that are still operating, met in the last week or so. The Taoiseach and Minister McEntee went to London for the meeting of the BWIGC, and the Taoiseach and I were in Jersey last week for a meeting of the British Irish Council. And in all forums, we make very clear our opposition to the legacy legislation being brought through the Houses of Parliament by the British government at the moment. That hasn't weakened in any way whatsoever. I've raised it directly with the Prime Minister, have discussed it with President Biden. It's been discussed with US members of Congress. As Deputy Tobin mentioned earlier, it's been raised by the Good Friday Agreement Committee chaired by Fergus O'Dowd in their recent visit to Parliament, and certainly we haven't ruled out, and very clearly haven't ruled out, an interstate legal challenge to it. However, let's not forget that the UK government doesn't necessarily treat decisions of the European courts in the same way as we do, and many in the British government have been critical of the European Court of Human Rights, which is a different approach than we would have. And again, echoing Deputy Smith's comments earlier, we shouldn't make the mistake of suggesting that the de facto amnesty would just apply to former British servicemen. Would also apply to IRA terrorists and other paramilitaries. And most of the atrocities committed against women and children, civilians, the worst sectarian killings were committed by paramilitaries. And we all have a role to play when it comes to legacy, and certainly would encourage all parties to encourage anyone they may know or be connected to provide information to the Gardaí or the Northern Ireland Police Service if they believe it could lead to a prosecution of a paramilitary or somebody involved in any such killings, and to not partake in events that glorify violence during the Troubles in any way. The UK government published an extensive list of amendments to their Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy and Reconciliation Bill on the 8th of June. The amendments do not allay our fundamental concerns or those of many others about the bill and its compatibility with the UN Convention on Human Rights, and so we will continue to urge our UK counterparts to pause the bill. We believe the provisions in relation to the granting of immunity from prosecution for crimes such as unlawful killing are incompatible with the ECHR. We're also concerned about the shutting down of other avenues to truth and justice, for example, inquests, police investigations, investigations by the Ombudsman, and also civil cases. The government's view is that any way forward on legacy must be based on agreed human rights standards with victims at its centre, and it's against those parameters that we and others will assess the amendments. As I said earlier, I've raised the bill with Prime Minister Sunak at every available opportunity. In addition, the Taoiseach regularly raises these matters with the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, and there was a substantive discussion at the BIGC yesterday in London. On the 22nd of May, I met with some families of victims and with the Wave Trauma Centre to hear directly about their opposition to what's being proposed. As well as the widespread opposition by the public in Northern Ireland, serious concerns have also been expressed by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and by many members of the US Congress. And the Council of Europe has on 5 separate occasions, including most recently on the 7th of June, in an interim resolution, expressed concern about the bill's compliance with the ECHR. Discussions concerning the possibility of referral of an interstate case to the court by Ireland on the bill in the government's assessment is premature, but we don't rule it out and we will keep the matter under review. Just finally, in relation to Deputy Hawley's question, from our contacts with the UK government and from our contacts with the 5 major parties in Northern Ireland, we understand that there are contacts among the parties and that there have been some discussions between the DUP and the UK government with respect to assurances that they might be given, which would enable the Executive and the Assembly to be re-established in the next couple of months. The commitment that we've sought from the UK government is that there shouldn't be any further changes to the Windsor framework, and that also the Good Friday Agreement and all of its provisions should be respected. And we have those commitments, and I trust those commitments.